My name is Helen Monroe. I'm 59 years old, a widow, and I live just outside Charleston, South Carolina. Life here is peaceful, quiet streets, slow mornings, neighbors who still wave when you walk by. I've worked as an office manager at a small law firm for almost 20 years. It's not glamorous work, but it's steady. And after losing my husband, when our children were still teenagers, steady was exactly what we needed. I raised 2 children, Rachel, my daughter who just turned 32, and Jacob, my son, now 29. My whole life has revolved around them. Every decision, every sacrifice, every late night was for them. So when I saw Rachel's name pop up in my email inbox one quiet Tuesday morning, I smiled without hesitation, no subject line, just her name. I assumed it was a sweet update about her upcoming wedding, maybe a picture of a dress she was deciding between or a thank you for helping out financially. Just weeks before, I had wired her $30,000 to help with wedding expenses, everything from the venue to the florist she dreamed of hiring since college. I felt proud to support her, excited to celebrate this milestone with her. But as I opened the email, that smile disappeared. There was no greeting, just one word, Mom. Not dear Mom, not even a hi. She said that after finalizing the guest list with her fiancé Brandon and his parents, they decided I should attend the wedding virtually to keep things intimate, she wrote. And then, as if twisting the knife, she added, "We've set up a live stream link. Should feel just like being there. LOL. In that moment, something inside me broke, but it didn't make a sound. I stared at that email for what felt like hours. My coffee, still half full, had gone cold on the table beside me, but I couldn't move, couldn't blink, couldn't speak. I wasn't trembling. I didn't cry. There were no theatrics, just silence. A deep, hollow silence that settled into my bones. It wasn't the live stream that hurt the most. It wasn't even being excluded. It was the casual way she said it, the LOL at the end, as if the idea of her mother, who'd sacrificed so much, watching her only daughter's wedding through a screen, was a joke. And in that moment, I felt something shift, like a string that had been pulled too tight for too long, finally snapped, quietly, permanently. I typed only 4 words. Sure, enjoy your big day. No emotion, no debate, no pleading. I didn't ask why. I didn't fight for a seat at a table that clearly wasn't meant for me. I just stepped back. Because sometimes silence says more than 1,000 angry words ever could. I closed my laptop gently, stood up, and finished the now cold coffee without a single tear. Then, like it was any other Tuesday, I got dressed and went to work. But it wasn't just another day. That morning, I stopped pretending. I stopped pretending my sacrifices were appreciated. I stopped pretending I was included just because I gave. That was the moment I understood something deeply painful, yet incredibly freeing. To them, I had been useful, and now I wasn't. That was the day I quietly began rewriting my role in their story, not with rage, not with revenge, but with clarity. The drive to the office that morning was one I'd taken 1,000 times before. Familiar roads, familiar signs, familiar potholes that my tires always seemed to find. But something about that morning felt different. Charleston's early spring air was crisp, the trees just beginning to bloom, but I barely noticed. My hands gripped the wheel, steady, my heart not racing, just heavy. As I drove, my mind spun through every sacrifice, every missed moment of my own life I had willingly traded in the name of motherhood. After my husband died, stability became the mission. I worked late, picked up shifts, canceled trips. I told myself there would be time for me later, but later never came. I remembered standing in our old laundry room years ago, bills stacked in one hand and a calculator in the other, trying to figure out how to buy groceries and pay Rachel's college deposit at the same time. I didn't even flinch. I just made it work. That's what moms do, right? When Rachel changed majors twice, I paid for the extra semesters. When she couldn't afford to stay in New York after a failed job, I covered the plane ticket and her first few months of rent. When she called me crying after a breakup, I flew across the country just to hold her hand. And Jacob, when he wanted to buy a house with his fiancée, I co-signed without hesitation, wrote a check for $10,000, just like that. Not once did I think about myself. Not once did I keep score. But that morning, I started to realize something. It's one thing to give out of love. It's another to be used. That email, it didn't just hurt me. It awakened me. By the time I pulled into the office parking lot, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg to be included in a moment I was clearly deemed unworthy of. I wasn't going to scream or demand answers that I already knew wouldn't come. I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to act. After finishing the morning reports and answering a few emails, I left the office quietly during my lunch break and drove 3 blocks to Oak Ridge Federal Bank. I'd been banking there for years. Carlos, the branch manager, greeted me with his usual warm smile. "Mrs. Monroe," he said as he stood, extending his hand. "What can I do for you today?" I sat down across from him, placed my purse gently on the floor, and said, in the calmest voice I'd ever heard come out of myself, "I need to cancel a wire transfer." His brow furrowed. "Which one?" "The $50,000 scheduled for Eden House Estate," I replied, meeting his eyes. Carlos looked surprised. "That's a big transaction. May I ask why?" "The situation has changed," I said plainly. He clicked a few keys, scanning the screen. "You're in luck. It hasn't gone through yet, just in time." "Then cancel it." He paused. "Are you sure?" I nodded once. "I'm sure." I signed the necessary forms without a second thought. $50,000. Money I was ready to give for a wedding I was no longer welcome at. Money they assumed would always be there, but they forgot something critical. So did I, until now. I may have given everything once, but I still had the power to stop giving. And that's exactly what I did. By the time I returned home that evening, my phone was vibrating like it had a heartbeat of its own. 9 missed calls from Rachel, 2 from Jacob, a single voicemail played in a strained whisper. "Mom, please don't do this." I didn't press play on the rest. I didn't need to. I turned the phone off and set it aside, as if placing a heavy burden gently on a shelf. In the kitchen, I reached for a bottle of red wine I'd been saving since last Thanksgiving. Rachel was supposed to come home. She had promised, but then canceled last minute. "Work stuff," she said. I never opened it. Until now. I poured a glass, walked out to the porch, and let the fading sun wrap itself around my shoulders like an old familiar quilt. Birds chirped somewhere off in the trees. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance. The world somehow had not stopped turning, but inside me, a storm had finally settled. And then the memories began washing over me. The birthdays I spent alone. The holidays I pretended I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. The vacations I postponed. The new shoes I didn't buy. The old car I kept driving year after year because they needed tuition, rent, support. I thought about Brandon's mother, the woman who barely knew my daughter, yet whose opinion seemed to outweigh the decades I spent raising her. The woman whose idea of family meant excluding the person who carried Rachel through every hardship of her life. And finally, I thought about me, not as a mother, not as a widow, but as a woman. What did I want? Not revenge, not pity. I wanted peace, dignity, a life where I was more than what I could give. And that night, I began taking it back. The doorbell rang at exactly 9:04 p.m. For a moment, I debated ignoring it, pretending I wasn't home, pretending I didn't hear the chime echo through the quiet of my house like a warning. But something inside me, curiosity maybe, made me stand up and walk to the door, and it was Jacob, still in his office clothes, tie loosened, sleeves pushed up, phone in one hand like a shield. His expression was tense, but not angry, more confused, like he couldn't quite believe he was standing there. "Mom," he started, stepping inside before I could even respond. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Rachel's freaking out." I closed the door behind him, calm as ever. "Hello to you too." He sighed, already pacing across my living room. "She said you're backing out of the wedding now, that you're being difficult." I laughed, just once, quiet and sharp. Difficult for not attending a wedding I was uninvited from. Jacob hesitated. "You know how traditional Brandon's family is. His parents are paying for most of it." I raised an eyebrow. "Are they?" Because I already paid $30,000, and I was about to send 50 more. He stopped in his tracks. "Wait, you were sending another 50. "Was," I said, sipping my wine, "but not anymore." Jacob's face turned pale. "Mom, they're counting on that." "Not my problem anymore," I replied evenly. He raised his voice. "It is your problem. She's your daughter." "And I'm her mother," I said softly. A mother who was told to stay home and watch her child's wedding through a screen. He ran his hands through his hair, frustration mounting. "You always make everything about yourself." And in that moment, something inside me snapped quietly but finally. "Get out of my house," I said, and this time I meant it. The next morning, I woke up early, as I always do, but something felt different, lighter. I wrapped my robe around me, brewed a cup of coffee, and sat by the window as the first pale light crept over the street. My phone, still off from the night before, sat quietly on the kitchen counter. When I turned it back on, it lit up like a Christmas tree. 43 missed calls, dozens of messages, all from Rachel. The texts started passive-aggressive. "Why are you doing this? This is childish. You're ruining everything." But then the panic bled through. "The venue called. Payment didn't go through. If we don't pay by tomorrow, we lose everything. Brandon's parents are furious. They said This proves they were right about you. And finally, at 3:24 a.m., one message stood out like a whisper in the dark. I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I stared at that last line and smiled, not out of cruelty, but from recognition. Of course she didn't understand. She had grown up wrapped in my sacrifices so seamlessly that she never paused to wonder where her comfort came from. The flights, the tuition, the down payments, the silence. She thought it was air, something owed, something invisible. She never knew it cost me everything. And that was the moment it clicked. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about years of being used as a support beam no one ever thought might crumble. I wasn't punishing her. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was reclaiming something I hadn't realized I'd lost. My voice, my value, my boundary. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel guilty for setting it. I felt free. Around 10:15 that morning, as I reviewed a stack of contracts at my desk, another email slid into my personal inbox. Subject line, please don't ruin my wedding. I opened it, not out of hope, but curiosity. Mom, it began, I know you're upset about the live stream situation, but this is extreme. We've lost the venue deposit. If we don't pay the balance by end of day Paris time, the caterer walks. Brandon's parents are beyond upset. They say this is exactly what they feared. And then came the real reason for her message. If you send the funds, we can revisit the idea of you attending, but we need the money first. There it was, not an apology, not remorse, not even a whisper of regret for the pain she had caused. Just a negotiation. My presence at my own daughter's wedding had become a bargaining chip, something she was willing to revisit, but only if I handed over the check. My attendance, my dignity, my worth, all hanging on a dollar sign. I didn't reply. Instead, I closed the email, turned back to my work, and breathed. Around noon, Mr. Reed, my boss, stopped by my desk with 2 takeout bags in hand. Lunch, he said with a soft smile. That new Italian place just opened. I almost declined, like I always do, but something in me said yes. Over pasta and warm bread, he talked about his grandkids and the chaos and joy of chasing toddlers around the backyard. Then he looked at me gently. You seem lighter today, he said. I smiled, and then, for the first time, I told someone everything. When I finished, he simply nodded and said, sometimes the most loving thing we do is draw the line. And I finally understood what that meant. That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees and the porch light flickered on automatically, I pulled into my driveway with a quiet sense of finality. The day had been long, but not heavy. For the first time in weeks, I felt still inside, as though something sacred had settled back into place. But as I stepped out of the car, I saw a figure sitting on my front steps. A young woman stood quickly, brushing imaginary dust from her coat, and then I recognized her. Claire, Rachel's childhood best friend. I hadn't seen her in years. She used to spend weekends at our house, baking cookies, building blanket forts, staying up too late, laughing with Rachel on the living room floor. Mrs. Monroe, she said softly, almost like she wasn't sure I'd remember her. I do, I said, unlocking the door. Would you like some tea? She followed me into the kitchen, her eyes scanning the familiar walls like they still held echoes of late-night whispers and teenage secrets. I filled the kettle. Neither of us said much at first. "Rachel sent you," I asked finally. Claire looked down, then up. "She's a mess," she admitted. "They lost the venue. The florist backed out. Brandon's parents are threatening to cancel the whole wedding." Still, I said nothing. "She knows she messed up," Claire continued. "She just doesn't know how to fix it." I turned off the kettle, set 2 mugs on the counter, and asked the question I already knew the answer to. "Are you here to fix it for her?" "No," she said. "I'm here to ask, honestly, is there anything she can say or do to change your mind?" I paused, and the answer was simple. "No," I said gently, "there isn't." Claire's shoulders slumped at my answer, not from disappointment, but from understanding. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She simply accepted it. "Not even if she apologizes?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I handed her a warm mug of tea. "Words are easy," I said softly, "especially when people are desperate." Claire nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the steam rising between her hands. "You see," I continued, "the people who truly love you, they don't wait until you've walked away to start seeing you. They don't love you only when it's convenient, or when your silence finally costs them something." There was a stillness between us, not awkward, just honest. 2 women from different generations, sitting in a kitchen steeped in memories, understanding a truth that stretched across both of our lives. Sometimes love has limits. Sometimes the only way to be seen is to step out of the room completely. Claire didn't stay long. She didn't make promises for Rachel. She didn't beg me to reconsider. She just stood, thanked me, hugged me gently, like someone who truly saw me, not just as a mother, but as a person, and walked quietly back into the night. I stood at the door for a moment after she left. Then I closed it. But this time, I wasn't just closing it on a conversation. I was closing it on a version of myself I had long outgrown. The version who believed love meant endlessly giving, even when nothing was given in return. The version who thought showing up for others mattered more than showing up for herself. And in that stillness, I realized letting go didn't feel like losing. It felt like finally choosing. The wedding never happened, at least not the way they planned. They scrambled to find a new venue, but everything was booked. The deposits were gone. The florist moved on to another client. The caterer, unpaid, canceled entirely. According to Jacob, they ended up with a small backyard ceremony. Just a few relatives, Brandon's parents, a makeshift arch in the garden. I wasn't invited, and this time I didn't need to be. Weeks passed. One morning, an email from Rachel arrived. It was long, emotional, half apology, half excuse. She said she hadn't realized how hurtful it was, that she didn't mean it that way, that Brandon's mother had pushed for the decision, and she felt stuck. She hoped I could see it from her side. I read it once, then I archived it, not because I was angry. I wasn't anymore. I was done. There's a strange kind of peace that comes with walking away, not in anger, but in clarity. The silence that once scared me now felt like freedom. For the first time in decades, I woke up without bracing myself for who might need something from me. No more guilt disguised as love. No more last-minute requests for money or time. I made a new rule for myself. If my presence is negotiable, then so is my effort. These days, I go to work. I read novels. I signed up for a pottery class. I have dinner with friends who see me, not what I can give them. I laugh more, sleep better. I walk without checking my phone every 5 minutes. And I've learned something I wish I knew earlier. You don't have to burn yourself to keep others warm. Sometimes the strongest kind of love is the one you finally give to yourself.